So I was going through this magazine and it's up on my newsstand right now because I put all the March 1990 ones up to look at, and I haven't looked at this magazine ever. I've had it in my collection now for maybe 2 years, but still I never got around to looking at it. And it's the superstars of the 80s pick the superstars of the 90s. So let's take a look here at who is getting picked and by who for this news article story. Jerry Lawler picks Jeff Jarrett, and Kerry Von Erich picks Sid Vicious. Now, Jeff Jarrett would end up breaking out in the 90s to be a little bit of a star, right? He was Intercontinental Champion, U.S. Heavyweight Champion. He won the USWA title a few times in Memphis, but he didn't actually really break out until 2000 with the WCW title 4 times, and of course TNA with the NWA Championship many times as the 2000s rolled on into 2006 and 7 and such. Kerry Von Erich picking Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious in the 90s was supposed to be like a huge deal, and Sid was kind of his own worst enemy. But in doing so, he was a 2-time WWF champion and 2-time WCW champion, as well as US champ, and also held the USWA title a few times. So, good picks, but I don't think they had the longevity that they probably should have in the main event scene in the 90s. Jeff, of course, would get that in the 2000s, but then again, Jeff was also running his own promotion at the time, right? So, Ric Flair picks Brian Pillman. Unfortunately, Pillman passed away in 97. But in the 90s, I mean, him and Austin, the Hollywood Blondes, were easily one of the greatest tag teams ever. But his WWF run, unfortunately, was not worthy of even mentioning, I guess. He hardly wrestled, and when he did wrestle, he was in a feud with Goldust or helping the Hart Foundation, right? So Don Morocco picks the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior, of course, that's not bad, right? I mean, that's Warrior. If you can like him or hate him, but Warrior had a hell of a career in the 90s, and he wasn't even wrestling that often in the 90s. The early 90s, he dominated. He had the heavyweight title from Hogan. So to defeat Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania and to take the title, that's kind of a huge deal, right? Let's be honest. And then he kind of fizzled out, came back, fizzled out, went to WCW, fizzled out. So, I mean, he probably could have had a longer career and a better career, but at the time, early 90s, Warrior was a pretty big deal. Ken Patera picks Lex Luger. This might be the most spot-on pick you can have for the 90s when it comes to, what's that? Oh, something. When it comes to the 90s for a pick, Lex Luger held the U.S. heavyweight title multiple times. He was World Tag Team Champion in WCW multiple times. He held the WCW World title twice. But he didn't have a good WWF run, but that's not really on Lex. That's all Vince McMahon's doing. I'd say Lex Luger had a pretty dominant 90s, let's be honest. And of course, over here, Magnum TA picks Sting. This is spot on as well. Sting, probably the most dominant of the 90s with all the title belts he held from WCW, NWA, the world titles there, the U.S. heavyweight title, the world tag titles. I mean, Stinger, all the main events, the changing of the atmosphere of WCW in the 90s, definitely Sting had a huge part of that with the NWO and feuding with them. So, yeah, that's spot on. Definitely spot on. Bob Backlund picks Owen Hart. In the early 90s, I wouldn't have thought much of Owen Hart. He was, with Jim Neidhart as the New Foundation. He was with Coco Beware as High Energy. It wasn't until that heel turn that really helped spark Owen into main event status, feuding with his brother Brett for the title. Owen, of course, multiple-time tag champions with Yokozuna and the British Bulldog and Jeff Jarrett, Intercontinental Champion twice, European champ. Owen probably should have had a better run in the 90s at the end, especially when Brett left and went to WCW. I really thought that Owen Hart could have been the guy to defeat Shawn Michaels for the title to get revenge, but unfortunately for Owen, and just bad timing, bad luck, Steve Austin was on a roll, right? Stone Cold Steve Austin was on a roll. There was no way Vince wasn't going to not push Steve over Owen, right? Like Steve had to be the one to defeat Shawn. This one here, Big John Studd picks Coquina Maximus. Wow, who's Coquina Maximus, right? Look at that. Coquina Maximus, if you don't know and should know, it's Yokozuna. Yokozuna is Coquina Maximus. Coquina Maximus was in the AWA for a brief time. I think he wrestled down in the Continental area, the Fuller area, Robert and Ron Fuller's organization in the late 80s, early 90s as well. And Studd was right. Coquina Maximus goes to the WWF, becomes Yokozuna, and within 6 months is WWF champion at WrestleMania 9. So held it for 2 minutes, but won it back at King of the Ring just 2 months later, and held it for another 9 months, right? So, and not also don't forget the 2 tag titles he held with Owen. So Coquina Maximus, Big John Studd had a good pick there. I'll agree with that. Nick Bockwinkel, the Destruction Crew. No, this is so far off. Let me try that again. The Destruction Crew. Who are they? It's Wayne Bloom and Mike Enos. Now, who are they? The Beverly Brothers. That's them. Bo and Blake Beverly. That's them right there. They were AWA World Tag Team Champions, managed by luscious Johnny V at the time when the AWA was around. They seemed like they were going to be big stars. I believe they went to WCW as well during that time as the Minnesota Wrecking Crew under Masks. And Ole Anderson managed them for like a cup of coffee. And I don't even know what the deal was, why they brought him in for that and how they did that, because they were still part of the AWA at the time, as far as I know. This would have been early 1990. So AWA was still around then. They were still around around the end of 90. So they went to the WWF, became the Beverly Brothers, and did nothing. I think they went back to WCW too as a tag team, and then split up during the Monday Night War era. And no, sorry, Nick, hit a swing and a miss on that one, Nick. Tommy Rich picks Paul Diamond. Wow, nothing against Paul Diamond. Great talent, right? Him and Pat Tanaka as Bad Company. AWA World Tag Team Champions. They go to the WWF. They have the Orient Express deal. They have that great match with the Rockers at the Royal Rumble in 1991. They then they leave, go to ECW, and Paul Heyman used them properly in 93 and 94 as baby faces, feuding with the likes of Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge, the Public Enemy, for the ECW tag titles, as well as Ron and Don Harris and Taz. I guess then he was the Tasmaniac and Kevin Sullivan. But still, kind of a swing and a miss too on this. Paul Diamond did not become a breakout star in the 90s. I couldn't even tell you what he did after his ECW run in 94. I honestly don't know. I don't know if he wrestled independently after that, or if he kind of just did spot shows once in a while, or if he hung it up altogether. I really don't know. The ECW run is my last real memory of the former I believe he was Battle Cat and Max Moon as well in the WWF. So that's it. That is the picks from the stars of the 80s, picking who's going to be the stars of the 90s. I think it's safe to say that John Studd picking Coquina Maximus was a good pick. I don't think at the time when they wrote this that they knew that Coquina Maximus was going to become a Yokozuna, world heavyweight champion kind of thing in the WWF. I believe they probably figured he was going to go there because of his size and be kind of a big deal. But I don't think the writers realized just the impact that the former Coquina Maximus would have in the WWF and in pro wrestling in the 90s, as well as this Lex Luger and Sting, 2 solid picks here. I can't say that enough. Both world champions multiple times, Sting many multiple times. And Luger probably should have had more than that, to be fair, but hey, I mean, Ken Patera and Magna TA were right on their money with those picks. Now, I wonder if these are actual picks from these wrestlers or if this is just creative writing by the Stanley Weston crew. It's hard to say, right? I don't know. Because with these magazines, that's the beauty of it. You don't really know what's kayfabe and what isn't. You don't know if these interviews they have are real or not. And I think that's kind of the neat thing about the old wrestling magazines here. Is it's kind of leaves you with still with the imagination, like, well, is this really is this really what they're saying, or is this what Bill Apter or Craig Peters or or someone is saying for them? But anyways, it's still cool to see. Again, if you want this in your collection, it's the Wrestling Superstars from spring 1990, and that's the cover of it right there. It's kind of neat. It's very bright. This cover represents the 90s greatly. The fluorescent style of color, right? The yellow, blue, orange, pink, green. That is the style for what was going to be the early 90s. All right. Hope you enjoyed this one. I'll talk to you guys later.